Okay, let's get started. So, where we left off last week was the principles of mission command, right? And we talked about how this is a vision of your organization, right? This is what you're trying to achieve. This is what you're aiming at. Okay, you want an organization where you're using mission orders, you build a cohesive team through mutual trust, your leaders accept prudent risk, you enable subordinates to exercise discipline initiative, you're providing clear intent, and you create shared understanding and shared visualization. So the Army's really good at teaching leaders these principles, for the most part. Like you'll see them in the career course. You said you saw them in ROTC. So this is making its way out. I think this is one of the things that General Perkins has brought to the force. It used to be command and control. They moved to mission command, and I think that is a phenomenal move. But one thing that I think is lacking sometimes is they don't really go into, or Army leaders a lot of times don't go into, how do you build a cohesive team through mutual trust? Right? We just throw it up there and we're like, oh, build a cohesive team through mutual trust, exercise discipline initiative, right? Just do those things. Well, especially if you're young leaders who don't have a lot of experience, those are hard things to do, right? Those are very difficult. And it takes time and experience to really get after that problem set. So what we're going to talk about today is really how to do that. And do you guys have any idea how you would do that? Like just throw out a couple things.
Do like a leader's reaction course?
Okay, that's like a technique that you could use, a leader's reaction course. There's a key word in there, leader.
Just build relationships, take the time to build meaningful relationships.
Okay, build some meaningful relationships.
Kind of like the example that I used last week is like having like some type of crucible or like initiation into the unit so they can be part of the team. And
absolutely. So maybe some like sharing and hardship with your soldiers, things like that. Okay, so I'll give you a very broad answer. So you guys are giving me kind of like how to do that, right? Conceptually, the way that you do this is through Army doctrinal leadership. Okay, and that's why I've titled this class today, What is Leadership? Okay, so what is leadership?
Process of influencing people while providing. It's process of influencing people while providing motivation.
Purpose, direction,
motivation.
All right, so the definition of leadership is the process of influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission and improve the organization. All right, so I'm going to write it up here. And we're going to kind of break it down a little bit and go into this. And we'll break down the definition and explain it bit by bit. Purpose. All right, so we're going to start with that. We're going to start there. All right, why is leadership a process? Why does the Army define it as a process? Like, why isn't it a skill or something like that? Why is it a process? Any ideas?
because it's something that it takes time to learn and develop and to grow.
Absolutely. So it takes time, right? A process is something that you can analyze. It's something that you can look at. It's something that you can improve. It's where you can identify weaknesses and make it better. That's why the Army identifies leadership as a process rather than a skill or something that's innate. Because the Army's leadership doctrine says that anyone can be taught to be a leader, right? Anybody can be taught to be a leader. The Army's leadership doctrine is phenomenal. I think that Chapter 6 of ADRP 6-22 is probably the best and most concise thing I've ever read on leadership. And I'll put those up for you guys. Let's see right here. So ADP is Army Doctrine Reference Publication. ADRP is Army Doctrine Publication, Army Doctrine Reference Publication, and then FM is obviously Field Manual, and they're all 6-22. And these are all phenomenal references, but especially Chapter 6 of ADRP 6-22. All right, so a process, right, of influencing people. And we'll get to the influence in a minute. But by providing purpose. So what does it mean to provide purpose? What does that mean?
To give them a reason of like why they're doing what they're doing.
You hit it.
Kind of
Why?
Have an understanding.
Why? Why are you doing what you're doing, right? I was listening to a talk that General Perkins gave at Fort Benning to BOLIC and MCCC students, and he was talking about how he visited Google, and what Google does a good job of is explaining what they are for, right? What is your organization for? Why do you do what you do? Okay, and that's the purpose. A purpose is a vision of where you want the organization to go. It's a vision. All right, and that's a key word we're going to come back to. All right, so the next thing, purpose. Next is direction. All right, so what do we mean by direction? Like, what does that mean?
So that after they understand why, you kind of give them a little, like a way or a method of doing.
Absolutely,
what it is that they need.
you're exactly right. Okay, so the direction is how. How are you going to do what it is that? How are you going to achieve that vision? Right? What's the plan? What's the process that we're going to use to achieve that vision? So purpose, direction, and then motivation. So what do we mean by motivation?
How I see it is kind of like it's kind of giving them more of like kind of same thing with purpose. It's giving them kind of like an incentive or kind of like helping them make it their own so they can feel that they're involved and that they can.
Absolutely. So motivation is a tough one. I really struggled with this when I was sort of doing some analysis on this, is because it's not the why, right? It's not, you've already provided the why with the purpose. You're providing that vision. The motivation is providing some type of inspiration or some type of reason to accomplish that vision. Like not explaining why the vision's important, but explaining why they should participate in it, right? And that could be positive or negative. So I'll just put inspiration up here. Inspiration. Okay. Motivation to accomplish. The mission or improve the organization. Well, I think it's and improve the organization. The organization. All right. So, are you always going out, seizing hills, accomplishing missions, doing tactical stuff? No, right? Most of what we do is improving the organization. So I would argue when you get tasks from your higher headquarters, like small tasks to complete to turn in certificates or things like that, I would say that that's all about really improving the organization, right? It's moving towards readiness. It's not necessarily accomplishing the mission. So when you're looking at improving the organization, you're really looking at systems and processes, right? Which, when you talk about the difference between leadership and management, leaders make positive change, managers manage existing systems. That's sort of a good way to explain that. Okay, so we're going to go back to, we've talked about purpose, direction, motivation a little bit. We're going to talk about influencing. Okay, so what is influence? Like, how do you influence somebody? Okay, so the Army has really good doctrine on this. Okay, and this all comes from Chapter 6 of ADRP 6-22. The Army says that there are 9 doctrinal methods of influence. Okay, and we're going to talk about all 9 methods of influence here. Okay, and we're going to build to something so it builds on itself. All right, methods of influence. Okay, so the first method of influence is what the Army calls pressure. Okay, so what do you think pressure is? It's not a trick question. Like, what do you think pressure is? How to influence someone by applying pressure? What does that mean?
Applying stress.
Okay, what do you mean by stress? So let's say I want to get you to do something, right? I want to get you to do make me a product or to do something, right? Do some task for me. What do you think? If I was going to pressure you to do it, how would I do that?
By giving us a timeline.
Absolutely. So that's exactly what the manual says, right? Saying, look, you're going to go do this. You're going to do it now, or you're going to do it in this time frame, or bad things are going to happen, right? Or X, Y, Z is going to happen to you, or we'll stay late, right? That's what pressure is. All right. The next is legitimating. What do you think legitimating is? So legitimating is when I give you that task. So we'll all start with I'm telling you to do something, right? Legitimating is, I'm a captain, you're a lieutenant. You have to do what I say. Go. Right? That's what legitimating is saying. I have a legitimate authority over you, and you have to do what I tell you to do. Okay. The next is exchange. All right. Exchange. TJ, what do you got for exchange? What do you think?
Maybe like a quid pro quo type, like, if you do this now, I'll do this for you later. Or something.
It's exactly that, right? Do this and then you get this. It's almost it's a little bit like pressure, but instead of saying, hey, bad things are going to happen if you don't do this, it's like, hey, if you do this, then I'll get you a day off or get a late call or something like that, right? So that's what exchange is. Helps you can spell exchange. Okay, the next one is, all right, personal appeals. So what do you think personal appeals are? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's saying, this is sort of something that you would use with a peer, right? Hey man, help me out. Like, I've helped you out before, help me out, or something like that. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, personal appeal, saying, look, help me out, do this for me, right? That's what a personal appeal is. All right, so the next thing is, after personal appeals, is collaboration. Collaboration. All right, so the collaboration is when, so I use this collaboration pretty frequently. So I'll give you a task and I'll say, if you can't do it or if you have any problems, let me know and I will help you. Or if you mess it up, it's okay, I will go to bat for you, right? It's us collaborating on this task together. It's saying, I'm a participant in this with you, right? That's what collaboration is. Okay, rational persuasion is the next one. So Joe, what do you think this is?
Like kind of like a common sense type of approach. So like it's very rational. Like I'm not wasting your time or energy. Like this is gonna like improve like the organization. It's gonna help you out, me out. Like we're all like kind of like a part of it.
Absolutely. Hey, look, this is the most efficient way to do this. If you do this, it's going to help the organization by X, Y, Z. Okay? So it's just a rational approach, just like you said. All right, so after rational persuasion is something called apprising. So this is kind of like rational persuasion. But what apprising is saying, look, if you do this, it's going to be better for you in the long run. Right? It's not exchange. It's not saying, if you do this and I give you this. It's saying, look, if you do this, and maybe in the way that I'm telling you to do it, it's going to help you in the long run. It's for your benefit, right? It's going to benefit you. All right, apprising. Next is inspirational appeals. So you guys were all at the town hall yesterday? Or the State of the Battalion brief? Inspirational appeals. So this is what the battalion commander was using, right? Hey, look, we are the Lethal Warrior Battalion, right? We get after it. You guys are the best soldiers in the Army, right? Appealing to people's sort of emotions, getting after it in that way. Does that make sense? Inspirational appeals. Okay, and then the last one is something called participation. Participation. Okay, participation is another thing that you would use a lot with peer leadership. It's saying, look, I've designed this process, or I have an idea for a process, and I would like you to participate in that process with me, right? I have this new system. It would be like, let's say I came up with a new system for how to track awards or something like that. And then I go to the other company commanders and say, hey man, I've created this system for the S1 that I think would help them track awards. Would you like to participate in the system with me? Right? I'm influencing them that way. And now you could say that kind of runs with maybe rational persuasion, like look at or apprising. It'll help you in this way. It'll make you more efficient. But participation is asking someone to participate with you in a system. Okay, so these are the 9 doctrinal methods of influence. These aren't necessarily hard and fast. A lot of these run together, and in one sentence, you could use maybe 3 or 4 methods of influence. Okay, so when I tell someone to do something, and I don't like sit down and say ask, unless it's like a mission or something tactical, right? So I ask someone to do something because I'm more of a commitment-based leader. But we'll talk that in a minute. All right, so a lot of these will run together, right? Look, do this thing because it's efficient and it's going to help you, and if you do it, then I'll give you this. One sentence, I just use 3 doctrinal methods of influence. Does that make sense? So it's not like, look, I'm just going to use this one method when I'm influencing this person. You can use a variety of different methods. Okay. So the Army says that the methods of influence run along a continuum of compliance on one side and commitment on the other. it runs along a continuum from compliance to commitment. Now, when you look at pressure, do this or I'm going to do this to you. Do you think that that's compliance-based or commitment-based?
Compliance.
It's compliance-based, right? So we'd probably put that, if we number these, right? 1, we probably would put that somewhere in here. Right? Now, if we say legitimating, do this because I'm a captain and you're a lieutenant. You have to do what I say. Right? It's gonna land somewhere on this continuum. Where do you think it would fall?
Towards the compliance.
Probably towards compliance. It's not saying, hey, I'm gonna like do something bad if you don't do what I say, but it's probably more on the compliance end. Okay? And then exchange. Okay, so these, a lot of times it depends on how you say something, right? That's why there's a lot of nuance to this. It's not hard and fast. And that's why I think the Army's doctrine is really good, because it does a good job describing what these are, but it doesn't necessarily dictate this exactly what it is. So if I say, hey, Tom, look, I need you to do this. You're not going home until it's done. Okay, I need you to go and do it, right? That's pressure. It's saying, look, you're not leaving until this is done, right? That's different than, Tom, go do this. You have until the end of the day. If you don't do it, you're going to be outside digging trenches, right? Those are both pressure, but they probably don't fall the exact same place on the spectrum, right? And just like that, pressure could be more towards the commitment end, depending on how you do legitimating, right? TJ, I'm a captain, you're a lieutenant, you have to do what I say, go do it, right? That could be a lot different than, TJ, this task is really important. If you don't get it done, I'm going to have to give you a negative counseling statement, right? That's more commitment-based than, that method of pressure is more commitment-based than a legitimating way and saying it that way. Does that make sense? Do you guys see how tone and the way you say something can affect where it falls in the spectrum? Yeah. Okay. So we can just we'll just sort of throw them all up here, right? So we'll put 3 for exchange, and maybe personal appeals is somewhere in here. And again, these are windows, right? There's windows. They're not necessarily dots. So 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. All right, so all these methods of influence fall somewhere on this spectrum. So the way that I like to describe this, and now I'm moving from doctrine into my analysis of doctrine and how I think it's the best way to apply it. Okay, because this isn't necessarily in the manual, what I'm about to show you. What I have painted for a vision for leaders in this company is that I want you right in the middle. That when you are using these methods of influence, it washes out for you to be in the middle. Okay? Now, why is it that we're not all the way over here on the commitment end or on the compliance end? What do you think?
I think it depends on the task at hand and how you're going to communicate in terms of there's like a deadline, like a timeline, like certain tasking condition or standard.
Absolutely. So you take the situation into account.
Plus, also, if you're all the way at one end of the spectrum, you kind of become blinded to, like, if I'm just blinded fully on the fact that, like, you're giving me, if I'm fully committed, then that means, like, I'm kind of blinded on the side, like, hey, is there something that he's maybe missing or that he's dropping?
Sure.
Kind of like that back and forth feedback.
So what if you were a leader that only used inspirational appeals and participation?
He's going to kind of get run over.
You're going to get, what? Say it again.
You're going to get run over.
You're going to get run over, right? Someone's going to look at you and they're going to think you're weak. And you're not going to have control, right? But what if you just use pressure and legitimating all the time?
Then they're just going to do the bare minimum. They're not really going to be thinking for themselves.
People are going to be afraid. People are going to be afraid to take initiative, right? So what I like to say down here is with compliance, someone who just does compliance, who only focuses on compliance, I would call a tyrant. That type of leader, and I would call that type of leader a tyrant. Completely unreasonable, never using any of these, always using these 3, right? In some way, shape, or fashion. Now on the other side, on the commitment side, someone who doesn't know how to get performance out of people, doesn't know how to push people, I would call that person, the name I would use is a milquetoast. Okay, milquetoast. In the middle, right in the middle, I would call that person a leader. Okay, so how do you determine whether you're on this side, or somewhere in the middle? Well, you look at the frequency at which you use these methods of influence. How often do you use them, right? So if you're a leader who uses these a lot, doesn't use these, and then uses these a lot, what does that sound like to you? Bipolar, right? Has anyone seen that type of guy before? He's up there like screaming and getting after people, or he's like all super nice, like trying to like make friends with people, right? Everyone's afraid. Which way is this guy going to go today, right? That's a bipolar leader. Okay, well, if you have a leader who is focusing on these types of things, rational persuasion, collaboration, personal appeals, and then uses these infrequently, so his curve would look kind of like this, right? That's really what you're looking for. He has the ability to use these commitment and compliance-based methods of influence, but he's focusing on building that team, right? He's focused on building commitment, and that's ultimately what he's trying to get after, right? He's using rational persuasion, collaboration, personal appeals more frequently. Less frequently, he's using pressure, legitimating, and exchange, and less frequently, he's using uprising, inspirational appeals, participation. Does that make sense? Have I lost anybody? Okay. So what I would say for you leaders here is draw this diagram for yourself, and as you go throughout the day, once you tell someone to do something or you exert some influence in some way, shape, or form, mark where you think that action was, right? It's a great way to track. It's like journaling, right? If you just yelled at Private Snuffy because he messed something up, and you told him if he does it again, then he's going to be running laps or something, that's down here, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with using methods of compliance or methods of commitment. It's about frequency. It's about long-term trends, okay? And if you're not the type of leader who uses these three, rational persuasion, collaboration, and personal appeals, I'd recommend you give it a shot, right? Give it a try. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next is how this fits into the organization at large. Okay, do I still have everybody? Okay. I draw this little graph. On the x-axis, I put commitment. And on the y-axis, I put compliance. Okay. Vision. Okay, now again, I'm taking Army Doctrine and applying it the best way, the way best to apply it. Okay, so on the x-axis here we have commitment, and on the y-axis we have compliance. Okay? Down the middle, this is how how you view your organization. Now remember how I said everything that you do as an individual leader falls somewhere along this scale of compliance to commitment, right? Every single action of a leader in an organization falls somewhere in this scale. Right? A compliance-based method of influence falls closer to the y-axis, and a commitment-based one falls closer to the x-axis. And what you do is you can aggregate and add together all of the different things that leaders in an organization does, and you can start to diagnose problems with that organization. Right? So a leader comes in and they provide a vision for the organization. Right? A vision. Now I would say Mission Command is a really good vision that you can use, right? This is what we want to get to. We want to build a cohesive team through mutual trust, right? We want to create shared understanding. We want to encourage people to exercise discipline, initiative, and accept prudent risk. Okay, that's a vision that you can use for your organization. So we'll just use that for purposes of this. And you want to create your own vision, right? Ours here in Baker Company right now is trust and discipline, right? That's what we're getting to. Everybody trusts everybody, and everybody has discipline and disciplines the people around them, right? So as you move closer to that vision, everything leaders do falls somewhere along this scale, right? So let's say you first take over and you're getting ready to go to the field. All right, well, you have timelines that you need to meet, right? There's things that you have to get done. So everything that happens as leaders hit this individual scale, organizationally, they're moving towards compliance, right? So maybe they get in the field, they issue a bunch of op orders, they do a lot of things. All right, now they're coming out of the field, right? They're doing their counseling, they're doing their AARs, right? Maybe they're focused more on commitment down here. Right? They've moved closer to that commitment scale. By using rational persuasion, they have time to explain things. They're not under so much pressure. Right? So they're using those commitment-based methods of influence. They're building teamwork. Hey guys, we just did some amazing things out in the field, and you guys should be proud. inspirational appeals, right? Hey, there's this, maybe the XO comes out with platoon leaders. Hey, there's this system that I've designed for recovery that I think is going to benefit all of us. Would you guys be interested in doing that? So you see what I'm saying? How the situation dictates the type of method of influence that you're going to be using. So it moves closer to commitment. And then maybe you're getting ready to go back out to the field, or you're starting to do something else, and timelines start to matter, right? You start being more compliance-based, or you go on deployment, right? And as you're weaving through this, you're oscillating around this perfect, this ideal, right? The ideal organization is this straight arrow all the way up to everyone always balances commitment and compliance perfectly. Is that ever going to happen in an organization? No, it's never going to happen, right? But you're going to oscillate around it, right? You're gonna sort of bounce around it, if that makes sense. Okay, now let's talk about some sicknesses or some pathologies that I guarantee some people have seen before. Okay, now who's been in an organization where people cannot stand the leadership, they're scared to take initiative, they just say screw it, they have zero morale, and people are constantly coming down on them? Has everyone's been? Yeah, hopefully not this organization. Okay, that means that those leaders have fallen outside the boundaries, right? They've drifted away from where their mission, or from where their vision should be, right? They've drifted outside the box. So some things would, some indicators that your organization is failing along this scale would be like low morale, right? That'd be one thing. So people quit. They would describe the leadership as toxic. All right, that would be an indicator that your organization's leaders are focused way too much on compliance. They're acting down here. They're doing these things. They're not building commitment to the organization. There's no long-term commitment. This organization will fail. Ultimately, they will fail. Whether on the battlefield or in training, they're going to fail. All right, now let's go the other way. Let's say you have an organization who everything that they do is out here, right? Everything is, they can't ever get anything done, right? Well, how would you describe an organization where you just have super weak leaders? No one knows what is going on.
Undisciplined.
What's that?
No discipline.
Right, so I would say no discipline, right? What else would you say? Maybe fraternization? Did you say something, sorry, about Bill?
I said undisciplined as well.
Okay. Yeah, no discipline, fraternization. I would say that there are safety hazards here because people aren't acting in accordance with proper safety protocols. Right? This is how you know that your organization or you as a leader is failing. You're not balancing commitment and compliance. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is a way to think about leadership. This is how I think the best way to apply Army leadership is. Now, we're going to talk about something that I like to go over in these classes, which is 360-degree leadership. Okay, this is an enormously important topic because we tend to think of leadership in terms of hierarchy, right? We tend to think of it in terms of the leader is at the top, and then he has the organization underneath him. So maybe he has some platoon leaders and platoon sergeants if you're a company commander, or he has, and then after that he's got squad leaders, and then maybe after that he's got team leaders, and then maybe inside of those teams there's like a senior PFC or something, right? So this is how we tend to think of leadership in this very top-down, idea. The leader leads that organization. But what I would submit to you is leadership is not top-down at all, and nor should it be top-down. Leadership should be 360 degrees. And what I mean by that is, I'll use myself as an example. So when I tell platoon leaders what to do, or we collaborate on a task, I always ask for their feedback. And I try to, as much as possible, give my intent about what I want to happen, not how for it to happen. And what I let the platoon leaders do is, again, when you look at the definition of leadership, is I allow them to influence me by giving me purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish a mission or improve the organization. Right? So it's not just the leader acting in a top-down manner, getting people to follow him. It's also you using the process of influencing to influence your peers and to influence your superiors, right? And that's an extremely important topic because as you guys rise through the ranks, don't take everything onto yourself. You can distribute that pressure and you can distribute that power to people in your organization and give them the ability to lead you. You have to make them comfortable leading you. Does that make sense? Now this is a sort of radical topic for the Army because we never think of it in terms of subordinates leading their leaders, right? Have you ever heard that before? Maybe you have, I don't know. No, okay, shake your head down. Yeah, I had never heard of that before, right? Before 360-degree leadership. So you as leaders have to train your subordinates to lead you, to give you good advice, to give you good feedback. And you have to train yourself to learn how to use it, right? To learn how to internalize it, pull the best out of what they're saying, and then go with that. A lot of the times, if you feed them the right information, they'll come back to you with what you wanted to do anyway. Does that make sense? And it has to do with your peers as well. You look to your left and right, and when you're talking about influencing your boss, you think you can use pressure, legitimating exchange to influence your boss? No. No, right? You can't. You may be able to use some of the 3 in the middle and then 3 on the right-hand side of the graph, right? This is really about telling, this is about asking, and this is about balancing the two. Okay, so usually when you're talking to your boss, these are generally what you're going to do. So you want to lead your boss. Don't just accept what you're given. Analyze it critically, right? That's one of the tenets of Army leadership is to teach leaders to think critically and creatively. If you're not doing that as a leader, to let your soldiers think critically and creatively, you're not acting in accordance with what the Army says. Okay. All right. So that is more or less it. Does anyone have any questions?